Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 7 of Xiaolin Showdown, Ring of the Nine Dragons. And at the beginning of this episode, we see Omi as he's trying to multitask. Basically, as he's been spending more time with the other Xiaolin monks in training, he's been learning of other recreational activities from outside the temple, including soccer, playing video games, or in the case of Clay, learning how to rustle or cat rustle with a lasso. Basically, he's enjoying all of the recreational activities. The only problem is he doesn't have enough time in the day to do all of them, and so as he tries combining all of them together, all he really does is sucking at them. And while the monks do tell him maybe he could rein it in a bit, again, Omi says he wants to master them all, and he just doesn't have enough time in the day, especially combined with all of his normal duties with the temple. As Omi bemoans how he can try and make his whole schedule work, Dojo comes in as he reveals that another Shengang Wu has revealed itself. And this particular Shengang Wu is a ring called, well, the Ring of the Nine Dragons, which the episode is named after. And basically what this ring has the power to do is, well, duplicate the wearer to make them as much as 9 warriors, hence the name. With the information on standby, the monks board Dojo and go to an ancient pyramid of Olmec, I think that's what it is, and try and find the ring, which is located in said pyramid. Unfortunately for them, Jack Spicer beat them to the punch, but thankfully Dojo's memory of where they hid this particular Shengang Wu is better than the others, so he's able to at least guide the monks down a path that leads them to the ring first. And thus, they manage to get away with it before Jack and Wuya even get a chance to find it. However, when the monks bring the ring back to the temple, well, before they can demonstrate its power to Master Feng, he takes it away, claiming that this particular Shengang Wu's power is too great for a single warrior to handle, and that in time they may be able to use it, but for now, they still need to focus on their training. As such, Master Feng takes it down to the vault and tucks it away, forbidding the Xiaolin monks from using it. However, Omi doesn't really take Master Feng's warnings to heart, and so that night he sneaks into the vault and he steals the ring. As such, to try and make sure that the ring doesn't overwhelm him like Master Feng says, he decides to use it to only duplicate himself into 3 versions of him, into 3. And so, he uses the ring, and, well, it does seem to work, as we soon see 3 Omis. But we can immediately tell that something's a little up with them, as all the Omis aren't carbon copies of one another. One Omi seems a little disoriented, one seems more battle-focused, and one is mostly just hungry. As such, all 3 Omis go off to decide to do their own tasks on their own, since, hey, there's now 3 of them, they can multitask, but all of them aren't really good at what they're doing. One Omi tries practicing his moves and keeps fumbling, one Omi tries practicing his video games and later claims he never even got beyond level 1, and one Omi apparently has no self-control because he spent the entire night in the kitchen and just gorged himself on cookie dough all night to the point where in the morning, he's just fat. However, when all the Omis meet up that morning, they end up merging back together as they can hear Master Feng around the corner, and they don't want him to find out that they stole the ring. As such, with them all merged back together, Master Feng finds Omi, none too wise that he stole the ring, and lets him know that Dojo has sensed another Shengang Wu revealing itself. In this case, a little, I guess, monocle you can call it, called the Falcon's Eye, which gives whoever wields it the ability to see through solid objects. As such, the Xiaolin monks once again go out to search for this Shengang Wu, and this Shengang Wu is located in the mountains. And then this one's not like the grassy mountains you see in previous episodes. This is like a full snowy mountain and everything, so they all have to get in their winter gear. Unfortunately, Jack heads them off just as they arrive on the mountains, and while the warriors do their best to fight off his robots, unfortunately Dojo gets hit head first with it, and then he pretty much just takes a dive, resulting in him crashing into a mountain. And while for the most part everyone is fine, Dojo gets a major bump on his head that screws with his Shengang Wu senses, so he can't exactly laser in on where the Falcon's Eye is. As such, the monks decide that it's probably best to just split up and search for the Wu. However, Omi, to try and improve his odds of finding it, decides to use the ring again as he multiplies into 5 copies of him, all of whom are given the order to find the thingy, as none of them can remember that it's called the Falcon's Eye. Unfortunately, none of them are good at this. One particular Omi gets distracted with any flowers he finds. One Omi is found just bouncing up and down on a rickety bridge because he thinks it's fun. One Omi, which is the fat one again, apparently started eating the snow to the point where he started getting brain freeze, and another Omi is just kind of wandering around. And each of the Xiaolin monks do encounter them one by one and begin wondering what the hell is up with Omi until they all start grouping them together as they soon start realizing, yeah, something is wrong. With Dojo confirming that the reason why the Omis are acting this way is because of how the ring works. Apparently, the ring doesn't duplicate you, it divides you. Basically, it's one of the reasons why Master Feng told the Xiaolin monks in training why they can't use the ring and why they probably had to be better trained to use it. Because, well, when you divide aspects of yourself into various parts, well, they're kind of weaker. Something that I kind of find fascinating when you try and take someone's personality and split it up is how the individual pieces tend to be weaker without the whole. The parts of our personality that make us who we are tend to support one another, intermix, intermingle, and all come together to create the person that we are. Our talents, our hatreds, our weaknesses, our strengths, everything comes together to make us who we are. But the Ring of the Nine Dragons essentially takes those pieces and essentially just puts them here and there. And unfortunately, the more one divides with the ring, the less, well, useful or practical the clones become, because every aspect of who you are is divided up. Hence why you need to be very well versed with using the ring before you get the chance to use it. Because if you're focused and ideal, then even split apart all the pieces of who you are can still work together as a great whole. But unfortunately, Omi, despite all of his training, is still a Xiaolin monk in training. And well, him divided by 3 was already slightly incompetent. So now he's divided by 5, and each of them are barely keeping track of what their task is. And unfortunately, one of these Omis kind of gets caught in the middle, as while he's just wandering around being tired and looking for fun things to do, he accidentally stumbles across the Falcon's Eye in a tree, and he ends up going to try and grab it because it's shiny. And ultimately, only to run into Jack Spicer, who also makes a grab of the Falcon's Eye, and thus Jack challenges this particular Omi to a Xiaolin showdown, him wagering the third arm sash while this Omi ends up kind of wagering the Ring of the Nine Dragons. And basically the challenge this time around is just a snowboarding race. Both Jack and Omi will race down the snowy mountain, and whoever can grab the Falcon's Eye before the other is the winner. And so while this Omi never really says, "I accept the challenge," Jack takes all of his actions to mean he'll do it, and so Xiaolin showdown time. And once again, still really awesome. The mountain actually looks like a floating plateau with all these twists and turns and so forth. And what I kind of love is that when Jack and Omi go to get their snowboards, Wui is just holding them up for them so they can get them. But either way, they both go in, and the other Omi just kind of rolls with it because, hey, it looks fun. As such, Jack and this Omi end up racing just as the other Xiaolin monks would arrive with the other Omis. Because, yeah, Dojo is aware that this Omi found the Falcon's Eye and went to go tell them. As such, while the Xiaolin warriors are worried that Omi's going to flub this, considering how badly divided he is, they at least are going to try and take solace that he's in the game and hope that this particular Omi will put up a good fight. And for the most part, he actually does. Without even trying, this Omi is actually racing really well against Jack, as he's just kind of treating this like a leisurely activity, just having fun, enjoying himself. And at one point, he even manages to sabotage Jack, as when Jack almost flies off a cliff and then uses the third arm sash to swoop back, Omi's just there opening up for a hug, which actually throws Jack off his board. And thus, after the hug is over, Omi accidentally gets back on his board and then keeps going. Which, again, it shows, which I kind of like. It's a subtle way of showcasing Omi's potential, that even divided, at least one of him does have the capability of, putting up a good fight. However, things don't exactly go well by the end, as Jack has to race to go find his snowboard while Omi continues going. And eventually, Omi does reach the Falcon's Eye, and of course, if he wants to claim victory, all he has to do is grab the thing. Unfortunately, this Omi takes his sweet time trying to grab it, and unfortunately his snowboard ends up drifting away from it as the Falcon's Eye was at the top of a slope, and, well, there wasn't enough forward momentum to keep him up there. So he ends up racing away without even realizing he's lost, as in his mind, he's just having a fun time. As such, the other Omis see this Omi still playing the game, and they want to get in on it, as they all want to jump in and have fun. And while the other Xiaolin monks try telling them, no, you can't get involved in this, the other Omis get up so upset they start stomping their feet, which in turn causes the cliff they're on to start cracking and then give way, resulting in all 4 Omis falling to the ground alongside a large bunch of snow. And as a result, the 4 Omis end up landing on the 5th one, who's a part of the showdown, and all 5 Omis are buried under snow. Thankfully, though, because all these Omis wound up touching each other, they all merge back into one single Omi who's back in the game. Unfortunately, Jack took this brief opportunity to essentially rig the game a little, as he got back his snowboard and then immediately turns on his jetpack and races right to the Falcon's Eye. And once again, while Omi is able to race rather well and tries outmaneuvering Jack to get to the Falcon's Eye, it's too little too late. Jack manages to reach the Falcon's Eye, and seconds before Omi can grab it, he does. And so Jack wins the showdown, not only winning the Falcon's Eye, but sadly the Ring of the 9 Dragons as well. And so, with a final FU, he flies away, taunting them that they still only have 1 Shengong Wu. As such, the episode ends as the monks return back to the temple, and yeah, Master Feng is pissed with that Omi directly disobeyed him, and his punishment? Wash all the dishes with a scrub brush, and there are a lot of dirty dishes. And Master Von pretty much tells Omi that they have to be spotless and that he'll be back in an hour to check on his progress. And so he leaves, and while the other monks do feel sorry for Omi, he admits that this is his fault. He did deliberately disobey his master, and now because of his actions, they still only have 1 Shengong Wu. However, Raimundo does offer a small ray of hope. After all, part of the reason why Master Feng didn't want them to use the ring was because he didn't feel that any of the Xiaolin monks were ready, and Omi clearly displayed that they weren't. However, now Jack Spicer has the ring. And if they were not worthy to use the ring right now, what about Jack? And sure enough, we end up cutting back to his lab as we see Wuya be in the middle of a whole corral of idiotic Jacks as she tries to regain control and sadly is failing. So, yeah, that's the episode. So, my thoughts on this one? I really like the episode. For one thing, I love the Ring of the 9 Dragons. I'm a sucker for clone stuff, and the idea, and as you can probably tell when I did kind of briefly diverge on that tangent, I love the idea of what would happen if we got divided as people. Like I said, our personalities are multifaceted, multi-layered. There are numerous aspects of our person that make us the people that we are. Not just experiences that we live through, but our talents, our practices, basically our interests. All of these things come together to make us who we are. And by taking those aspects and splitting them up, what do you get? What is created when other parts of our personality are not there to temper other parts of the personality? What happens if you take all our negative impulses and separate them from the good impulses? Would the negative impulses go out of control? Would the positive impulses be weaker in comparison? I don't know. It's fascinating in my opinion to think about, and it's the way they showcase it with the Ring of the 9 Dragons is really interesting. While from a very early point, we can tell that something is wrong with Omi when he first uses the ring, as all 3 Omis, while more dedicated to their tasks than when Omi was divided into 5, all of them inherently suck at what they do. One Omi was bad at fighting. One Omi was bad at video games. One Omi had 0 self-control when he started eating. That's because Omi's personality was divided among 3 of them. And unfortunately, while all of them recognized that they were faltering, 2 of them, I think the fat Omi had a good time, they failed to recognize the problem with using the ring. And so when Omi decided to use it again to look with a Falcon's Eye, he didn't realize that doing this was actually going to be halving his potential by 5, or dividing it into 5. You know what I mean? It lowers his potential versus actually improving it. And that's kind of a nice little, and I kind of like how they showcase that, especially when Omi starts dividing more and more. With 3 Omis, you can already see a steady decline in his abilities. And then when he divides into 5, it gets even worse. While 2 of the Omis, the thing is, what I kind of like is that when Omi does divide, you do see that there are specific copies of him that do kind of carry over between iterations. Like when Omi divided himself into 3, there was the serious-minded Omi, the I'm just gonna call him Fat Omi, and I guess a little unfocused Omi. With unfocused Omi actually having swirly eyes instead of a regular one. But all three of those Omis also appear when he's divided into 5. But even those Omis feel lesser than the first time they appeared, because again, Omi divided himself into 5. And it's, like I said, it's fascinating to see it here. It's fascinating to see these different facets of Omi's personality divided up like this. And yeah, it also kind of carries over one of the lessons of the episode. You've got to learn to, it's essentially learning to divide your time in the best way possible. There's always people that like to overachieve and like to do it all because they think that they're capable of doing that. The problem is, though, when you divide your focus so much, it it ultimately makes your competency in the tasks you're doing lesser. It kind of reminds me of an episode of Steven Universe Future, the very special episode 1, where the moral of the episode was literally just learning to even out your time and not overwork yourself. This episode does a good job at showcasing as well. Omi went into this episode wanting to do everything because he didn't have enough time in the day. The only problem is that because he had to divide his attention over so many things over so little time, it meant that he couldn't fully get into what he was doing. And as a result, he faltered in everything. And that same thing happened with the Ring of the 9 Dragons. Omi saw the ring as a way to immediately fix his multitasking problem, because now there's 3 of him who can do all the tasks that he thought before. But the only problem is, Omi's not getting cloned. He's being divided. So ultimately, while each of the clones may be focusing on a single task versus Omi, who's trying to focus on all of them, the competency stays the same. It would have been the same. The results would have been the exact same if Omi tried doing everything that he did without the Ring of the 9 Dragons. If Omi tried dividing his focus that much as himself, it would have resulted in the exact same thing. If Omi tried dedicating him, like in the case of Omi, like imagine like the first time Omi used the ring and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna play video games while fighting, while also eating." Ultimately, it would have still ended in failure because Omi couldn't dedicate himself fully to the task. And throughout the episode, as he continues trying to use the ring as a shortcut to getting all these tasks done, it continues to bite him in the ass. So much so that by the time that he and the other monks find the Falcon's Eye and one of his clones is challenged to a Xiaolin showdown over it, he fails. Because while the clone was good at the given showdown, it wasn't fully dedicated to the showdown. It wasn't giving it its full attention. And because of that, despite the fact that victory was quite literally an arm's length for this guy, he didn't care. All he cared about was just riding on the snowboard and having fun. He didn't care about the greater consequence if he lost. Hey, he at least got the snowboard. He's enjoying himself. And even the other clones didn't see the urgency of him needing to get the Falcon's Eye. They just thought, ooh, snowboards, fun, and just wanted to dive head first into it. And as a result, by the end of the episode, because Omi kept trying to find all these shortcuts of getting all these tasks done, the monks suffer a loss. They wound up losing the Falcon's Eye and the Ring of the 9 Dragons in the showdown, and it's all Omi's fault. And I think that's a good way of letting the lesson stick. That if you try and divide your focus too much, you're ultimately just going to be hurting yourself in the end. You're not going to be doing the tasks that you want to do very well, and, well, you're going to suffer consequences. And that's what we see with Omi here, as his actions did kind of screw over the Xiaolin monks as a whole, which, again, I like how they showcase that here. It's a good way of showcasing the lesson, and also allowing the negative ending to let it stick. Because sometimes you do need to show negative consequences. You can't always just show positive consequences from doing the things. Sometimes you need to actually show someone being stupid and see them immediately realizing the fault in what they were doing. So, to that regard, I liked it. And again, even from a meta perspective, still like the ring just for what it can do. As for the Falcon's Eye, it's alright. We don't end up seeing it being used in this episode, but it's a alright Shengung Wu. Essentially, it gives you eagle vision so you can see very far ahead, and as they said in the episode, it can let you see through walls. So it's useful in the right circumstances. So in that regard, it's alright. I don't know, there are better Wu in my opinion, but it's a thing. That's all I could say. It's a thing. On top of that, I will also admit, there is some humor in seeing Omi's antics and Omi's antics. And if I can give something else in this episode, this is also another episode that once again has the bad guys getting a win. And while I still say that it's a good way of also of essentially helping the lesson stick by showcasing the negative consequences of Omi's behavior, this episode also does a good job at giving the bad guys a win compared to last week. Which, I'm sorry I'm going to be bringing up Chameleon again, but that episode was just kind of dumb. And the thing is, I like the fact that the bad guys won in this episode. Partially because, like I said, it does a good job at hammering in the lesson and allowing it to stick, since we see the negative consequences of Omi's actions. But what makes it also work, in my opinion, is that Omi being dumb with what he's doing this episode is very in character. Last week, one of the problems that was pointed out to me with the writing in the episode was how the characters were being very stupid and out of character. Well, the thing is, yeah, the bad guys netted an easy win last week because everyone was being stupid, but the stupidity that the heroes were showcasing was very much out of character for them, especially with Clay, who was shown to be one of the smarter ones. But in the case of this episode, Omi's arrogance is kind of a well-documented thing so far. It's been there since the first episode, and in various points throughout the episode, we've seen that Omi tends to put himself on a pedestal, as he thinks that he's trained longer than the other monks. He should be a master of this. And the part of the reason why he thought that he could still use the Ring of the Nine Dragons is because, oh, I've trained enough. I mastered everything. I'm good. I can do all this. And so having the bad guys get a win because of Omi's arrogance and overinflated ego, it actually makes sense. And like I said, it helps hammer in the lesson well as we see the consequences of that. And so that regard, the writing is still pretty on point. So ultimately, what do I have to say? Again, still a really good episode. I think it's still a really good episode. The Ring of the Nine Dragons is honestly a very cool Shengang Wu. I love how they showcase it well. The lesson is actually really nice. The writing is very on point. I like the ending as it does show I like the ending with how it showcases the negative consequences of Omi and his attitude. And of course, and I'll give credit to, the showdown was still a lot of fun. It was actually a pretty fun race, and I'll give credit. And it actually did have a lot of suitable tension, especially when Omi did finally merge back together, and you think, okay, he can finally get a win, only for Jack to steal the win. So, in that regard, again, I like it. It's good stuff. On the whole, I think Ring of the Nine Dragons is a very good episode of Xiaolin Showdown. Has a good moral, good pacing, some honestly good humor, especially with the Omis, some cool new Shengang Wu to showcase, and the ending I think is good. I think the ending is strong enough to at least let everything sink in, and still impart a good lesson for both the audience, while also furthering along Omi's character as he kind of has to eat humble pie. So, yeah, on the whole, enjoyable episode. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week where we see the Xiaolin monks try and expand their Wu collection and come into possession of a very dangerous Shengang Wu. So till then, I hope you have a good evening and take care.